gas, no brake.
And now we have liftoff. Welcome to the New York Jets podcast. I'm your host, Frank Jan Piccolo. And with me today, I have Kevin, the Buffalo Jet fan. Kevin, what's going on, bro?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. Excited for the legal tampering period to start tomorrow so we could stop talking about who might be on the Jets, figure out who is on the Jets, and then have our eyes set on the draft. Let's go.
No doubt, no doubt. First off, this show is our 1 year anniversary on this podcast. So I want to give a special shout out to all our listeners out there. Special thank you to the Gotham City crew for helping us get our feet on the ground. But with that being said, today we're gonna talk about a little bit of combine news. The Jets had a couple of signings before the legal tampering period began, and then we're gonna hit the free agency period, which is always a fun topic to talk about. But before we get into that, Kevin, why don't you tell our listeners how you became a Jets fan and where they could find you and your podcast at?
Absolutely. I was born and raised on Long Island, a family of Jets fans. My uncles would always take me to games, and they indoctrinated me into this life of what's been, for the most part, suffering so far. But I am optimistic about the future of the franchise. So I guess you could say I first started watching in the Vinny Testaverde, Curtis Martin, John Abraham kind of era in the early to mid 2000s. And you can find me on YouTube and Twitter at the Buffalo Jet Fan. I've only been doing this a couple weeks. I don't have any aspirations to make a living or make money doing this. I just don't have any Jets fans who live near me. So just trying to find a community of fans to talk some Jets with.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I guess my fandom starts kind of around the same time, a little bit earlier. My first game that I went to was the first game Dennis Bird walked back onto the field. So 3 or 4 years prior. But I tell my co-host John, who became a Jets fan during the Rex Ryan era, maybe a little bit before that. But you look at it, once Parcells got here, they kind of turned the tide with this team. And I kind of feel like Saleh is that same type of coach, defensive background, players coach to a sense, but no nonsense. So, year one wasn't too good, but we're gonna get into it. So let's get into the combine a little bit. There was some news coming out of the combine that Kayvon Thibodeau left early because he said that the day was too long. What are your thoughts on that and the possibility of the Jets drafting him at 4 or 10?
I've been disappointed in the past week or so of some of the not so great news regarding Kayvon Thibodeau and maybe some of his character and work ethic and teammate that side of his game, because the talent side of his game, there's no question there. And for a while, I was hoping and praying that he would fall to 4 with the New York Jets. And now I'm not sure if we're going to go in that direction. I think that, especially as a team that's rebuilding and trying to establish a culture, if he's even a risk, if any of that is even a question, then I think you have to go in another direction. You could go Sauce Gardner, you could go offensive line, and then maybe go edge rusher at 10. So if you can get a guy who's 85% of the talent in a Karlaftis, in a Travon Walker at 10, whose character checks out, then that's probably the direction you have to go, because we don't want a Jamal Adams situation on our hands. I think if we were a more established team that already had a winning culture and we could bring in a younger guy who was a little rough around the edges and fit him into our mold, maybe we could take that risk. But I think for the Jets, we're not in a position to take that risk with a number 4 overall pick.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with most of your points there, except for the point that the talent's there. The talent is there, but when I was breaking down him, because I was all about him mid-season, even towards the end of the season, and then I popped on a bunch of the film, and one game in particular really stood out to me was watching that UCLA game, and he got completely dominated by that left tackle. When I was breaking down his film, and I'll get into this more next week when we talk about our first round draft prospects, but his secondary moves aren't that good, and if he can't get by you with his with his speed rush. His bull rush is non-existent. So top that with his character issues and saying that the combine is too long. I think I think these guys need to start looking at the combine like it's a job interview. And like I get the quarterbacks not wanting to go through that meat market, which is the NFL combine, and show there at their pro days. But I think KT is going to have an issue if he doesn't show out at his pro day.
Yeah, I agree, and you're right about him with relying on his get off. His release is really nice, but he's a little smaller than you like, about 10, 15 pounds smaller than you like in a 4-3 defensive end. So the raw power isn't there, and there's some inconsistency. Obviously, the highlights are nasty, but like you said, some of the tape could be inconsistent. I've been leaning more towards Sauce Gardner. It's kind of crazy because he was a guy that, a couple months ago, I was like, maybe if we trade down to like Pittsburgh at 20, we could take him. And then like 2 weeks ago, I was like, maybe at 10. And then now I'm like, we might want to take this dude at 4, kind of the opposite in terms of the character. He actually stayed late at the combine and was signing autographs for fans. He said that like he's never drank alcohol or smoked tobacco because like the game is enough for him to feel turned up and feel some type of way. And I just feel like he's just oozing like authenticity and character. And 4 might be a little high for a corner, but he's never allowed a touchdown in his career. He allowed under 200 yards receiving the entire season, 6'3", good ball skills. And then I think then we don't have to go ahead and pay a Carlton Davis or a JC Jackson in free agency if we go that route. And Bryce Hall becomes your corner number 2, Michael Carter in the slot, and the cornerback room would really shuffle into place from there. So I'm leaning more towards Sauce at 4 and away from KT.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I wouldn't hate if they picked Linderbaum at 4 either. But let's get into a little bit of news. The Jets re-signed Connor McDermott, Will Parks, and LaMarcus Joyner this past week. Do you have any thoughts on the signings of those 3 gentlemen?
Um, I mean, with McDermott, I'd still want to draft a mid-round swing tackle because I feel like we need to do better if one of our starting tackles goes down. It was pretty tough to watch him against Buffalo at the end of the season, so I think we could definitely upgrade there. And then with all the safeties, I think they're just trying to throw a bunch of as many guys into that safety room as possible and see if one of them sticks. I still like the idea of signing a free agent safety and then maybe having all those young guys battle it out for the other safety position, and then LaMarcus Joyner is probably just for depth.
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed when Joyner tore his tendon in that arm. I had high hopes for him coming back from that cornerback slot that the Raiders had him in and playing back into his, I would say, his more natural position of safety back there. The coaching staff seems to love him. I think if they don't draft or not draft, if they don't pick up a veteran free agent in free agency, I could see Joyner being penciled in as a starter because I just don't think Ashton Davis is it. And we talked
No,
about it. Yeah, we talked about it during the podcast. From looking at him and knowing football like I do, he just doesn't look like he has the heart to play safety in the NFL. Maybe he'll be a good special teams player, but he just comes up soft on these tackles. And you look at the interceptions that he had; they were like pop ups to left field. They weren't really like good.
they weren't ball
Good.
hawk plays.
No. They not even a little bit. And when you look at that, and when you look at that draft, that 2020 draft class isn't looking too hot. You talked about it. Becton went down, and McDermott had to play some tackle when Fant got hurt. And God, McDermott is one of the worst offensive linemen that I've seen at the NFL level. His feet are slow. He has terrible hand placement. I get it; they need depth, and I don't know. Maybe he's that emergency tight end if the Jets can't pick up a tight end. But it'd be rough if he had to play any extended period of time.
Yeah, we can't go into the season with him being a priority backup. I mean, he's barely a rosterable player. He's like a CFL level talent, honestly. And like you just said, he doesn't have any real traits that that stand out. Joyner, I mean, he's probably still better than any safety we had on the roster last year after Marcus May went down. And Ashton Davis, yeah, I don't think he's going to make the team. Maybe just because guys don't like to cut their own draft picks, but he just seems like, yeah, he's a good athlete. You know, he's a track runner, but that just didn't transition to the football field. Maybe if they want to try moving him to like slot corner because he does have some pretty elite speed, but just doesn't seem to want to hit people, and just doesn't seem to have like a good feel or football IQ for the game.
No, definitely not. But Will Parks is intriguing. I think he could become a player, maybe a third safety eventually. Towards the end of the season, PFF had him as the fifth best rated safety during that time span where he was playing. And a lot has to do with it looked like the defense was getting a lot more pressure that was coming, so that made it a little bit easier for the defensive backs, a la Michael Carter the second, Bryce Hall, Jason Pinnock was starting to come around. What are your thoughts on Will Park possibly seeing some playing time this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be. I think ideally you like him as like our third safety who could come in for either safety spot. I think that's as high on the roster as I'd want to see him. Jason Pinnock's a name to watch though because he struggled at corner early in the year. Then they moved him to safety, and he actually, again, it was a small sample size, just like Parks, but for a stretch of 4 or 5 games, he had a Pro Football Focus score in the 70s and was an upgrade over Elijah Riley, or who we also brought back, and Ashton Davis. So and also Will Parks, there was a tweet that like Tyrann Mathieu was super pumped that Will Parks was back with the Jets, and he said something like, "If I was with the Jets, I would wear this number." So maybe that's something to keep an eye on because he's a free agent.
Yeah, that would be something. So let's talk about our yeah. We have a couple of our free agents. Are any of these guys that are going to test out free agency would be a priority for you if you were Joe Douglas?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the common name from Jets fans is Braxton Berrios, but I think that it would be worth it to pay him more than you would normally pay a wide receiver number four. Number one, he's an all pro on special teams. So if you look at guys who don't play on offense or defense and are just kick returners, like Andre Roberts, who we had and then let go after his all pro season, those guys make 2.5 million a year. So you can tack that value on top of whatever value you have for him as a wide receiver. So say if you value him as 5 million as a wide receiver four, well, then you can pay him 7.5 million because he's also an all pro on special teams. And I think we want to make sure that we are four deep at wide receiver, even if we don't bring in a legit number one wide receiver and we maybe go wide receiver at 10 and then re-sign Barrios. And none of those guys are a proven number one, but we have four really solid football players. I'm okay with that. And he's going to get on the field. Corey Davis and Elijah Moore missed a combined 14 games last season. And even if everyone stays healthy, be creative. Go with some Chan Gailey four wide receiver sets if you need to. So I'm about bringing back Braxton Berrios. I like his versatility on the jet sweeps and the end arounds, and I think it'd be worth it to pay him up to maybe even 7 million a year.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago that I kind of would front load that deal, maybe make it incentive driven later on in the contract to make it more cost effective for the Jets, especially because they're doing really well salary cap this year, and I don't see a lot of players on the free agent market that I would break the bank for necessarily unless there's a trade that Joe Douglas is going to pull off, a la DK Metcalf. But I don't know how realistic a trade like that would be, being how many holes that the Jets have. But I do like Braxton Berrios for the fact that you kind of want to build a wide receiving core like you would a basketball team, right? So I think Corey Davis would be your center, and then Braxton Berrios would kind of be your point guard, and then you talk about Elijah Moore fitting in somewhere as like a shooting guard, and they still need a couple more players. And with that being said, one of my favorite free agent targets for the Jets this year uh, is DJ Shark, the receiver out of Jacksonville. I think he fills an immediate hole that Denzel Mims couldn't fill for the Jets. With that, he's a reliable receiver. He did what he didn't do. He didn't do anything this year, but I think a lot had to do with that debacle with Urban Meyer down in Jacksonville and playing with a rookie quarterback. I really wasn't impressed with the play of Trevor Lawrence. I, in my opinion, he was the worst quarterback that got a lot of playing time out of this draft class.
Yeah, it was really, and didn't catch half of the flack from the media that Zach Wilson did, which is interesting. Um, Chark is a good name to watch. He's 6'4". He's got good speed. He's kind of like you said, what we were hoping that Denzel Mims would be. I think we need to go into this season assuming nothing with Denzel Mims, assuming he's going to be no higher than fifth on the depth chart. Because I was excited about that draft pick, but he looked lost on the field last year. There was a game where he had no catches and 3 penalties, which I don't know how you do that. But Chark, he had 1,000-yard season a couple years ago, and obviously last year with Jacksonville, everything was a mess. Obviously, he only played 4 games. He got hurt, so the injury is something to check out. I probably would like to do it on a 1-year deal, but I'm down with that.
What about you? Who is your number one free agent get that the Jets must have so we could start being a competitive football team going forward?
My number one guy would probably be safety Marcus Williams of the Saints. I think that he just checks a lot of boxes, being that he's young, he's 25, he fills a position of need, he's durable, he doesn't miss games, his analytics are always elite, and he's really versatile. He tackles well, he can play center field, he can cover tight ends, and I think we could just plug him in at one safety spot and then have like a cheaper younger guy at the other safety position. I think safety and tight end were the 2 worst rooms on the roster last year. And yeah, it costs a lot of money, but still a top end safety. Maybe have to pay him 14, 15 million a year, on a 3 or 4 year deal. But again, that's going to be for his prime. And I think that that'd be a really solid move for the Jets.
That's smart, right? When you talk about certain, and I love Marcus Williams. I was pounding on that last year before he got franchised by the Saints. That Marcus Williams just checks all the boxes that you want from your free safety, right? That was a huge problem for the Jets is that they could not create turnovers last year, which in turn helped Zach Wilson because it makes a short field. And Zach Wilson on a short field is probably a lot better than Zach Wilson, the rookie quarterback, trying to drive 80 yards downfield with the weapons that we were bringing out last year at times with everybody in and out of the lineup. So, with that being said, I'm going to stay on the defensive side of the ball. My number one get that the Jets must throw the bank at is the All-Pro linebacker from Green Bay, Devondre Campbell. I think it was a huge mistake by Joe Douglas by not solidifying that linebacker spot going into the 4-3. Yeah, they picked up Jared Davis day one of free agency last year, but for some reason he just couldn't get it. If you put Devondre Campbell into this linebacking core with C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams, I think it changes the whole complexity of this defense. You talk about those three. You talk about Lawson coming back. You talk about Quinnen and Sheldon Rankins. The Jets are probably going to lose Foley Fatukasi into free agency. There's rumblings that he's going to get a mega deal. But I think this player in particular could unlock what Saleh wants to do on defense. When you talk about the linebackers that Saleh had in Jacksonville, the linebackers that Saleh had in Seattle, and the linebackers that Saleh had in San Francisco, that is the key to the Saleh Ulbrich defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, Devondre Campbell had an excellent year last year. He was like, it was like Pro Football Focus score in the mid 80s, like super elite. He's huge, 6'4", long arms. He's fast. And our linebackers struggled to cover last year. So maybe his length and athleticism would be an improvement there. Linebacker and safety. We were just really weak up the middle, and the screen game killed us. The tackling killed us. Our young corners actually held up. Like, it's not like our guys were just getting beat deep over the top with long passes. We just couldn't tackle anybody. And the only thing to worry about with Devondre Campbell is a little bit of a one-hit wonder. Before last year was his really big breakout year, but maybe he's a late bloomer, kind of like Demario Davis was for us. So I'd be okay with that. Plug him next to CJ Mosley. And I think CJ will have a bounce back year. I think he was just trying to do everybody's job because he's like the linebacker to my left and to my right can't tackle. The safeties behind me don't know what they're doing. So it seemed like CJ was kind of playing a little bit of hero ball and got caught out of position a few times. So I think that's definitely a position we need to upgrade. Alua Khan is another name to watch from Atlanta, but I like Campbell better than him, even though Campbell's a little bit older. Where are you at in terms of how we allocate our resources? Are you more leaning towards offense heavy in free agency or defense?
No, I kind of have the philosophy that I'm more willing to buy a defense and build, or yeah, buy a defense and build an offense through the draft. I think it's a little bit easier to do it that way. And not only that, when you talk about the young pieces that the Jets have, you have Zach Wilson, Michael Carter, you have Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios is super young if they could re-sign him. And if you bring along another offensive piece, say like a Garrett Wilson, a Chris Olave, you're talking about an offense that has at least the next 3 years to grow together if they don't trade one of these draft picks to bring in a veteran.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth with this. I love Garrett Wilson. I really love Garrett Wilson. I think Atlanta might take him at 8. I'd honestly consider seeing if Atlanta wants to swap picks at 8 because that's how much I like him. I don't know uh, if you agree with me on that. He kind of
I
reminds
love
me.
I love Garrett. I love Garrett Wilson. My comp for him is Antonio Brown.
There you go. He reminds me of a guy who played a while ago, and that was Steve Smith from the Carolina Panthers, who a guy who just really played above his size. I mean, Garrett Wilson's mossing people, and he's like 5'11", kind of like a running back with the ball in his hands after the catch. Toughness, can do it all. I feel like, to me, out of all the receivers, I don't know if he's going to be the best, but to me, it feels like there's just no way he's a bust. I feel like his floor is really, really high. And in terms of the offseason, I've been leaning towards actually the opposite of what you said. I've been leaning towards building an offense around Zach Wilson with proven pros, and then drafting in the defense and dealing with some more growing pains on defense and coaching up the young guys, just because I don't want to go into the offseason next year and have that same situation where we're like, we don't know if Zach Wilson can play because we didn't fill our hole at right guard, and then we weren't deep enough at receiver, and then the guy we took was a bust. And I want to put all the excuses to rest. We have the resources to do it. And if we improve, win whatever 7-8 games, and then the next off season we have to balance it out and go more on defense, then I can live with that. It's better than the inverse. I mean, even if you think, if we spend like almost all of our free agent dollars on offense and then go, you know, edge at 4 and corner at 10, and take um a safety and a linebacker with our second round picks. I mean, just right there, those are like, and then Carl Lawson comes back. I mean, right there, that's 5 new starters who are an upgrade. And the younger guys are going to be better too. Michael Carter is going to be better. Bryce Hall will be better. Ashton Davis can't be much worse. So I think that, really with spending minimal dollars, you can really change the defense a lot.
Well, then how would you attack it? Which guys would you go at and say, you know what, this guy is going to help Zach Wilson? Is it a Hayden Hurst? Is it an Allen Robinson? Is it maybe it's improving the offensive line? Maybe the Jets try to get Brandon Sheriff. What would you do?
So, I mean, obviously, it takes two to tango. So you don't know who wants to sign with the Jets, which is why I thought they should have done the Amari Cooper trade. Even though $20 million is a little rich, I still think that um, it might have been worth it, because you can cut him after the 1 year, and there's no dead money. And I mean, Allen Robinson's gonna get 18 million a year, probably, with more guaranteed money. Someone's going to give Christian Kirk 15 million. The Giants gave Kenny Galladay 20 million. Mike Williams just got 20 million. Julio Jones is getting 22 million and he's washed. Chris Godwin and Michael Thomas are getting 19 million. They're coming off devastating injuries. So that's kind of what it cost. And if you look at the Jets leading receivers the past like 6 seasons, I mean, you're talking about Jamison Crowder 700 yards a year. You're talking Elijah Moore 500 yards last year. You're talking 2018, Chris Herndon 502 yards, our leading receiver, a borderline rosterable tight end. So if we have to pay a little Jets tax to bring in a number 1 wide receiver, I think we should have done it. But that's all done now. So I think next we would move our targets to Allen Robinson. If we want to bring him in, he's always put up really good numbers with really bad quarterback play, as opposed to last year. He had a down year, but he's still 28 years old. So I throw an offer to him. I think the DK Metcalf trade is a little bit unrealistic. I don't think Joe Douglas would do that. And then, so I think number 1 wide receiver, and then I'm looking at tight ends. Zach Ertz, he's a little older, so maybe on a 1-year deal, and then draft a tight end in the second round. And then the right guard spot should be pretty easy to fill because there's like 4 or 5 guys that you could bring in: Tomlinson, James Daniels, Austin Corbett. There's like 4 or 5 players in their mid to late 20s that you could get for $8 to $11 million a year to plug that hole, and then bring back Berrios. So I think just those 4 moves: wide receiver one, bring back Berrios, right guard, sign a tight end and draft a tight end. I think, and then you'd probably want another running back to be a counterpunch to Michael Carter, maybe a bigger back, like a James Conner from Arizona, or draft a running back in the mid rounds. And I think that would be sufficient enough to evaluate whether or not Zach Wilson is a franchise guy.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get into possible trades that the Jets will get into, we got to pay our bills here at the Now We Have Liftoff New York Jets podcast. College basketball fans, join the action on the court during the biggest tournament of the year with DraftKings Sportsbook. Turn your team's victory into your own big win. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $200 in free bets. If they do, it's that simple. You win. If they win, you win. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you can still join the college hoops actions with DraftKings pools. Everyone can play free pools all March long for a shot at a share of $250,000 in prizes. Simply join a pool and answer questions like who will make it to the next round and who will hit the most three-pointers, then track your results. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. That's TPPN. Bet $5 on any college hoops team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If they win, you win with promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 years or older. Restrictions apply. If you or someone you know have a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services can be assessed by calling 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-426-2537 in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, or Wyoming. 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado and New Hampshire. That's 888-789-7777/visit. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-877-70-STOP-7867 in LA. And 877-8-HOPE-NY/text. 21 years or older, physically present in the states, minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. All right, let's get into possible Jet trades. I kind of disagree with you a little bit on the Amari Cooper. I just didn't think the player was worth it. Like I have Amari Cooper on my dynasty fantasy team, and he'll just go missing for games. If I'm paying that amount of money, it has to be an impact player because the Jets have too many holes to wrap up that amount of money, even if it's for just 1 year. So if I'm the Jets, I'm going to call a team that's in salary cap hell, that doesn't have a quarterback right now, depending on what the Jets or what possibly happens with Deshaun Watson. And I'm calling the New Orleans Saints, and I'm going to see what it would cost to get Michael Thomas. I think he's a number one receiver. I think you possibly could get him for a third round, maybe make it a conditional second because he's coming off of some injuries. I was all about Calvin Ridley before all the gambling stuff happened. I was like, second round pick, let's go. He's an all pro talent. You know, the Jets have, I feel, a little better coaching staff than Arthur Smith, his staff down at Atlanta. But what are your feelings about that?
I mean, Michael Thomas at his best is definitely a significantly better player than Amari Cooper. I don't think anyone would argue that. I mean, he had that like 140 catch season or something not that long ago. Um, the injury scares me, but if the Jets did it and and Joe Douglas was aggressive in bringing in a veteran wide receiver number one for Zach Wilson, I'm not gonna kill him if he doesn't get like my favorite guy. So I'd be okay with that because it shows me that they're valuing what we just talked about in making sure that they can adequately assess Zach Wilson, and we don't have the same issue with Sam Darnold where when he got traded to Carolina, a buddy of mine, Carolina Panthers fan, texted me. He's like, "Hey, is he any good?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't know." I watched every snap, preseason, regular season, garbage time, every snap, and I didn't know if Sam Darnold could play because of the lack of weapons and offensive line, and offensive coordinator. So I think if we want to go ahead and bring in that number one wide receiver, if it's not my favorite guy, if there's some injury risk, I'm still okay with it.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Like, I think Joe Douglas is at the point now where he's got to be aggressive, right? He, I think he rebuilt the culture to a point where Salah can run with it. I think now is where they got to learn how to win. I think like like I go back and forth. Like there's two ways to go about it. Either you learn how not to lose, or you learn how to win. And there are too many times last year where the Jets kind of shot themselves in the foot. You would have a Nathan. Uh, uh, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast during the season, but if you listen to the podcast during the season, the Nathan Shepard penalties drove me absolutely bonkers. I didn't know how he was still getting as much playing time as he was getting with the mistakes that he would constantly make. But going back to Joe Douglas, I think now's time. Now's the time to be aggressive because he's been here long enough. He got rid of all the players that McCagnon, coveted. Jamal Adams, Sam Darnold, Quincy Nwhlo, all those bad contracts. The Ty Johnson, Le'Veon Bell. All we have is C.J. Mosley left. So all those bad contracts are gone. There's no dead money left on the books. I think it's time to really be aggressive. I'm not saying it has to be in free agency or it has to be a trade, but I want to see something aggressive, kind of like what they did for Vera Tucker in last year's draft. Is there a player that you think the Jets should target via trade that would significantly help the Jets right now?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I liked the Corey Davis and Carl Lawson signings. I think we just got kind of unlucky with some injuries there. I mean, I know Corey Davis had some drops, but his set cap hit is under 13 million. I think that's fine for a really good wide receiver number two. And Carl Lawson was dominating training camp before he had an Achilles pop. So I'm not going to kill Joe Douglas for that. For me, it's actually I'm really liking looking at trading down. If Pittsburgh wants to come up to get, say, they like Malik Willis at 10, then I would be interested in getting wide receiver Chase Claypool from them. And then obviously I'd probably want, like a pick in 2023 as well. But I like that move because, and I don't think Chase Claypool is necessarily a number one. I think he's similar to Corey Davis, but then you'd have two really good number twos, Elijah Moore in the slot. And then if you bring back Barrios for depth, those are your four deep at receiver. And Claypool is bigger. Our wide receiver room really lacked size last year. So he's a good 50-50 guy, a good red zone threat, has over 800 yards in both of his last two seasons. That would have been good to lead the Jets both of the last 2 years, 11 touchdowns over the last two seasons. And you'd get him on his rookie contract. So instead of paying an Amari Cooper or a Michael Thomas or an Allen Robinson upward close to 20 million, you get him on a second round contract. He's still 24 years old, younger than Denzel Mims. And then now you slide back to 20, and then maybe you're looking at um, I don't know, like a linebacker like Devin Lloyd or Linderbaum or one of the second tier corners like a McDuffie. So I think that would give you a lot of flexibility because you could solve two problems with one move because you still have that 20th pick, and then now you bring in a cheap starting wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if the Jets, you talk about the four pick, you'll probably Kyle Hamilton will be there. Maybe like you said, Sauce Gardner. I really like Sauce Gardner. I just like the way he plays. I think he's going to probably be the best cornerback out of this draft class. Uh, yeah, I think like 4 through 10. I think it's going to have to be defense first, and then maybe offense. A receiver if they don't go that route. Are there any other moves you feel that the Jets have to do or that they should do?
I don't think there's anything that they have to do. I can't like judge when each individual move. You have to see how it all comes together. Another name that's been thrown out there has been Danielle Hunter of the Vikings. I'd probably pass on that. I mean, he's a monster when he's on the field, but just the injury bug, I'm probably going to pass on that. Saquon Barkley, I'm passing on that. I don't want to give up capital and pay him $7 million when he hasn't been good in 2 years, and I could just get a running back um, in the mid rounds. I just think that the Jets have to plug those four big spots on offense, being right guard, wide receiver, one, um, and tight end, and then another running back. So as long as they do that, no matter how they do it, I'm cool with it. Calvin Ridley, I was on it too. He to me was the best wide receiver available before this all happened. I mean, you look at his 2020 year, it was like 1,300 yards, legitimate wide receiver number one. I thought that could have been our Stephon Diggs trade. So I'm really bummed about that. But I also wouldn't mind if we swung a trade to bring in a linebacker, because that's a spot that's really weak for us. So I know that the 49ers were looking to maybe move their linebacker. I honestly would consider the Saints are in salary cap hell as long as you mentioned. If they want to take a late round pick and give us Demario Davis back, he's still balling at the age of 33. So I'm okay with whatever we do as long as we plug those four holes on offense and then maybe use the rest of our capital on defense.
Yeah, speaking of that, I've been talking about trying to make it like a maybe a trade for Devin Bush. I really like Devin Bush. Um, he hasn't performed as well as most Steeler fans would have liked, but I really think in the right situation that he could ball out. And like you said, Danielle Hunter, I love Danielle Hunter, but the injury history scares me. And Saquon, that's a hard pass. I think Michael Carter at this point is a better running back. He does the same things. He hits. I think he hits the hole harder. I think Saquon just doesn't trust his knee, and sometimes that's all it takes. And then it'll really only be for a 1 year deal because he's gonna, unless the Jets are gonna sign him back for cheap. But why would you do that when you got Michael Carter, who I feel is more explosive at this point in his career than Saquon Barkley is?
Yeah, and it's a bummer. I mean, Saquon was like one of the best running back prospects of all time. I love them coming out of Penn State. He balled out as a rookie, but sometimes as a running back, it's that one injury and then you're kind of done. And I think he might be kind of done, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So what we do normally in the off season here, either me or John or our guests that we bring on, we have we try to finish the segment with something fun. So, in your opinion, what was the best Jets free agent pickup of all time?
Um, Honestly, I think probably Alan Faneca. I know a guard isn't super sexy, but I think if I had to pick like two, it would be we did it both in the same year. We brought in Alan Faneca and Bart Scott, and it was two guys who you don't play a sexy position, but just were nasty and changed the attitude of our team. And that was the 2 years where we went on those deep playoff runs. And when you were watching the Jets, man, it was like you were watching a different sport. Like they were just mauling people. We didn't have a lot of skill positions. Sanchez obviously was limited at quarterback, but we were running like six offensive line sets. We had a good fullback, two good linebackers, and it just felt like old school football. So I think those two moves when we brought in Faneca and Bart Scott were my favorite.
Yeah, I could get along with that, especially someone with that type of thinking, because I'm going to bring it back to when you became a fan. My favorite free agent pickup is when the Jets got Kevin Nwhlo from the Seattle Seahawks, and it kind of changed that dynamic of that team. They brought in Kevin Nwhlo, then they trade for Curtis Martin, and you changed that philosophy from we're going to throw the ball downfield to Keyshawn and Wayne Corbett to we're going to ground you to death in between the tackles with Curtis Martin.
Yeah, that's a good call. Kevin Mawai, and then obviously switching right to Nick Mangold. We've been blessed at the center position, so maybe the Tyler Linderbaum people on that hype train will get their wish. And uh, I, I think center is kind of an underrated position, honestly. I think you need to be good at center, so I like that.
Yeah, this year the Jets, kind of struggled the last couple of years with Connor. Connor McGovern is, he's caught a lot of flack. PFF had him graded high. I know PFF had him graded high, higher than I would have liked to see him graded. But I think a lot of that has to do with that GVR was just so bad at that right guard spot. When they brought Duvernay over from KC in that trade, it really solidified what the Jets were trying to do.
Yeah, would you like them? Would you want to bring LDT back?
I think without a doubt, without question, because it's going to bring depth no matter what. And I don't see the Jets bringing back Moses, and I don't know what's going to happen with like that. That Becton situation could get really ugly really quick. That no, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and the back then, I don't know. I mean, I it's tough because he has the talent to be such a franchise left tackle. I mean, if you think about if Becton, the prospect, was coming out this year, he probably wouldn't even be on the board when the Jets are picking at 4. Like he'd be in play for the number 1 pick. So that's the kind of talent he has. But being 350 pounds and having that lower leg injury and then not playing for that long, I'm imagining he's heavier now than he was when he hurt that leg. So, I mean, I think it's a situation like all or nothing. I think he either bounces right back and is like a Pro Bowler, or he just kind of fades out of the league.
No, without a doubt. But I think the bigger problem is going to be being that Fant played so well that you're going to have to give him the opportunity to start at left tackle. And I'm not too sure if Becton is going to be too keen on starting at that right tackle spot.
Yeah, me going into the year, I'm assuming that Fant is my left tackle because he was, to me, just to my eye, he has been the best left tackle since DeBrickashaw Ferguson on the Jets last season. I mean, he's the only left tackle that was that athletically smooth, great hands, not a mauler, but really did a good job protecting Zach Wilson's blind side. So I think he's earned the right to be. It's his job to lose, and I think Mekhi Becton, he is a little bit bigger. He's a better run blocker, so you could argue that he's a better fit at right tackle. Now, do you want your 11th overall pick playing right tackle instead of left tackle? Maybe not. But if you have 2 really good tackles, that's a good problem to have.
Absolutely, and I hope he's okay with that. And you talk about this Mike LaFleur offense. You need that athletic or that athleticism on that left side where you're trying to hit that wide zone the majority of the time. But Kevin, I appreciate you coming on, my man. I've been trying to get you on for a little while now, so I just want to say thank you for helping me break down this free agency and the next that starts tomorrow. It's going to be hot and heavy. So I'm sure I'll be DMing you when things start breaking down, and maybe get your opinions on what we talked about next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm happy to talk soon. Take care.
All right, everybody. Peace.